Plus, the bankers, they have only one answer, and that's assassination. So they assassinated Lincoln. Well, 100 years later, we got another young, bright president, John F. Kennedy, who had gone to Harvard, but apparently did not take any history courses because someone told him Kennedy, like most presidents, wanted to be remembered. And he asked some of his advisors, what could I do to really get the people behind me and have them appreciate me for what I've done? And so one of them said, why don't you go after the Federal Reserve System? They said, if you will get the Federal Reserve System off the backs of the American people, they'll put statues of you in every town in the United States. So Kennedy thought, well, that's a very attractive proposition. I think I'll do that. So he goes over to the Treasury and says, print me up some non-interest-bearing currency, the greenback currency. Well, they did this. And, of course, then the bankers, again, were horrified. They said, well, what is this guy doing? He's going to ruin us. So they hurriedly, he had this vice president named Lyndon Baines Johnson. And Kennedy had already decided to dump Johnson, which meant that his political future was nil. And so Johnson said to Kennedy, well, look, we're having a little trouble with the party down in Texas. Why don't you go down to Dallas and see what you can do? So when Kennedy went to Dallas, they had not one, they had 5 different assassination teams waiting for him. In case one didn't make it, the other would back up, you know. So Kennedy didn't make it, and that was the end of the greenback currency on Kennedy. So he went the same way as Lincoln, simply because he issued non-interest-bearing currency, which I admit is confusing and sounds dull and routine, but unfortunately this is the way that the world operates. These bankers are always conspirators, they're criminals, and they'll do anything to keep their system going. So, and that is why we had an anarchist in France in the 19th century named Proudhon, and Proudhon was a philosopher of some repute. And after many years of studying, he issued his dictum. He said, all government is a crime. He didn't say some government, or some parts of the government may be a little criminal. He said, all government is a crime, which is true. And why is all government a crime? It's because part of government is law enforcement. And when people get into government and they realize they control the law enforcement, then this becomes a license to commit whatever crimes they want, a license to steal, a license to lead the country into wars, anything they want to do. And this is a very heady situation. They suddenly realize, here I am, I've reached the power, I can do anything I want, no one can control me. And so this is why all government becomes a crime. And of course the people have really only one solution, and that is revolution. That's what Thomas Jefferson said. To have a successful government, you have to have a revolution every 25 years. Well, he said that 200 years ago, so we're a little overdue. But let's hope for the best. And because the United States was founded on revolution, and it's a revolutionary state, so revolution is really great. I have nothing against it. And look forward to it, as a matter of fact. And instead of my life as an artisan or bohemian, my life has been lived as a revolutionary, which was not what I intended at all. And in fact, I'm a person who avoids confrontation, and I like to take it the easy way. I don't go looking for fights and so forth. And the result was that J. Edgar Hoover, the head of the FBI, who had his eye on me for some time, he announced that I was the most dangerous man in America. Well, from his point of view, I was. But I wasn't a threat to my fellow Americans. They had nothing to fear from me. But J. Edgar Hoover and the criminals did. And so that's why they designated me with that title. And, of course, I was under daily surveillance by the FBI for 33 years. And I would actually come out of my apartment in Chicago. There'd be a row of cars with FBI agents. And as I stepped out, they would ostentatiously take their telephones from the dash and talk and make sure that I could see that all this is going on and that I would collapse in total fear at this terrible fate that was waiting for me. So I just walked by and I thought, well, look, gee, all this attention is nice, you know. Don't know what I've done to deserve it, but... and they spent millions of dollars to keep me under surveillance. And, of course, during that entire time, I never even got a parking ticket because when you're under daily surveillance by the FBI, it limits your activities. You can't go around robbing banks or so I had to be a good citizen whether I wanted to be or not. Because they had all of the instruments of modern communications. They had videos and they had bugs on my telephone and so forth. And so I just had to behave myself, which I managed to do, but I certainly did not like it. But actually I started out, as I say, as the protege of a man who was indicted but never tried for treason. Ezra Pound was indicted for treason by a associate of President Roosevelt's at the White House named Alger Hiss. He had Ezra Pound indicted for treason, and then, of course, he became one of the most famous traitors in the United States himself. But Alger Hiss had Ezra Pound indicted for treason because Alger Hiss was a KGB agent, and, of course, as a loyal communist, he considered Ezra Pound a fascist, an anti-communist, and a real threat. So they both wound up in prison, but Ezra used to complain. They kept him for 13 and a half years, and Alger Hiss only served 6 years. And when Alger Hiss got out, he got a government pension. Ezra Pound got no pension at all because he had, of course, never been in the government itself. But when I met Ezra Pound, I was taken there by one of my professors at the art school in Washington. I was attending at that time. And I could not understand why Ezra Pound would want to talk to me, you know. I didn't know anything. So I got over there and I found out that being a prisoner, he needed people coming in to talk to him. And he did have, over the period of 13 years he was there, he had 3,800 people come from all over the world to sit at his feet and to learn from him. So he was always a teacher. And he started right in. When I walked in, it was winter time there in Chestnut Ward. It was very dark and gloomy in the afternoon. And I was let in by a keeper who had an enormous collection of keys, bigger than my leg, hanging from his waist. And he unlocked this door, and I walked in, and then he closed the door and locked it behind me. And you always have a little feeling, well, you wonder if they'll ever unlock it for you. Maybe this is their chance, you know, to have me in there. So I walked in, I saw Ezra Pound sitting there, a very distinguished looking person, and suddenly it struck me, this man hasn't committed any crime. What is he doing sitting here? Why is he a prisoner? And I got so angry that my whole head turned black, and I was so enraged that I just thought then, I'm going to try to get him out of here. And I've never been so angry in my life, and that anger has lasted well over 50 years because nothing has been corrected. I did finally get Ezra Pound out of St. Elizabeth, and the government dropped all charges against him. Well, in fact, early in our association, I said to Ezra, well, what are your prospects here? And he said, well, I expect the government to drop all charges and to release me. And so when he told me that, I thought, well, he really must be crazy because there's no way this government's going to drop these charges. And so he asked me to ask around because I knew a lot of influential people in Washington through George Stimson at the Press Club. And so he said, ask around and see what you think you can find out. So I asked George Stimson, I said, would you ask people around, what does the government plan to do with Ezra Pound? Are they just going to keep him for a few years and drop the thing, or what are they going to do? So George asked a couple of people in Washington who were proteges of his. One of them was General Lucius Clay, the hero of the Berlin airlift. Another one was a Supreme Court Justice, Tom Clark. Tom Clark, by the way, got on the Supreme Court of the United States with a brilliant background. He was a lawyer for the mafia. And